Okay, let's take a look at a few things. Not sure how long this is going to take, but the FTC does provide this, what they call a 6-step compliance plan for COPPA. And I'm going to do a quick search here, real quick, on the PDF of the actual rule in the hopes that I can find a specific word, and the word I'm looking for is empirical. Okay. Let me just look here. Let me okay. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not finding what we had is we had another computer where some resources were open, and like so often is the case, you get here and you get on YouTube and boom, what you're looking for becomes impossible to find. Pretty normal. This is a 44-page document. Let's go back to these recommendations, okay? When it comes to a collection of personal information from children under age 13, COPPA puts parents in control. The Federal Trade Commission, it does put parents in control in principle, but the onus for not violating the act does not rest with parents. It previously would have been YouTube, but now would be content creators who have that responsibility. The FTC enforces the COPPA rule, which spells out what operators of websites and online services must do to protect children's privacy and safety online. For example, if your company is covered by COPPA, you need to have certain information in your privacy policy and get parental consent before collecting some types of information from kids under 13. So right off the bat, we see that the focus is squarely where it should be vis-a-vis my earlier YouTube videos about this. It is the collection of information that's problematic. Okay, it's not the YouTube content. Now, if there was something blatantly wrong, like some sort of clickbait that was exploitative, that would be frankly, I don't even know for sure if that would fall under the purview of this law. Okay? So in other words, if your content was problematic for kids, so you're trying to suck kids into this site and then the content is, borderline pornographic or whatever. To be clear, I don't know if COPPA actually covers that. Remember, this is the FTC. Okay, this isn't the children's advocacy group who solicited the FTC to take this action against YouTube. Their concern is about content. The FTC's concern is about this right here, collecting information, which of course is then used to sell data to advertisers in order to target those self-same children with advertising. So effective July 1st, 2013, the FTC updated the COPPA rule to reflect changes in technology. Violations can result in law enforcement actions, including civil penalties, so compliance counts. Number 1, determine if your company is a website or online service that collects personal information from kids under 13. This is really important to understand because of the way YouTube is handling this. Remember, the problem we have with YouTube right now is that per the act, it's important for you to determine if your website or your company is collecting information. The problem is if you're a YouTuber, it's not you that's collecting information and you have no control over that. It's YouTube that's collecting the information. So in this case, the responsibility for the choice of whether to collect information falls on you, but the determination of whether you're collecting information is with YouTube. And the answer is very simple. They are collecting information. Okay. The only way you have a scenario where they are not collecting information is if you specify on your YouTube channel that your content is for children. Okay. At that point, you do have the responsibility to deliver content that is not exploitative to children. Okay. But again, I don't know if that even falls under the authority of COPPA. What would happen then is you'd have all kinds of other problems crawling up your backside. Okay, so the problem of compliance with COPPA specifically, which is the hot button of the day, has to do with the collection of information from people who are on YouTube, who are watching YouTube. So it's when a child is using their parent's account or when they have lied about their age, so they're underage, stuff you have no control over. But if they're watching your content, then you're responsible because YouTube definitely is collecting their information, because they only don't collect the information from on YouTube content that is for children. Okay, hope that makes sense. So COPPA does not apply to everyone operating a website or other online service. Put simply, COPPA applies to operators of websites and online services that collect personal information from kids under 13. Okay. It only applies, COPPA only applies to operators collecting personal information from kids under 13. That's why in my earlier video I called YouTube's settlement with the Federal Trade Commission a coup. Because COPPA, or the FTC themselves, say that their own law applies to online services that collect personal information from kids under 13. To be clear, unless I got some really bad information, YouTube's settlement with COPPA effectively makes them an exception. Okay? Because they do collect personal information, but the law doesn't apply to them because the responsibility has been passed to you to declare, as it were, whether your content is for children or not. Okay? So the only way YouTube is in effect guilty of collecting personal information from kids under 13 is when somebody who's under 13 is on YouTube and isn't supposed to be. Okay, so why is this a problem? It's a problem because there are YouTube channels that clearly target the viewing habits that have developed over the last several years of kids that are, in fact, in many cases, under 13 years old. Okay, here's a more specific way of determining if COPPA applies to you. You must comply with COPPA if your website or online service is directed to children under 13 and you collect personal information from them. So in this sense, YouTube is in compliance because, number one, their service, the aspect of YouTube that does collect personal information is specifically not directed to children under 13. Okay? So it's the part of YouTube Kids, I guess it's called, or whatever. I haven't actually explored that, but the part of YouTube that is directed to children under 13 does not collect personal information. That's why when you tell YouTube that your content is for kids, you can know that when people watch your content, their information is not being collected. However, you also effectively are unmonetizable. Everything that allows you to make money with YouTube is removed in the children's content. And you know what? I don't object to that. I mean, in a way, that makes perfect sense. Okay, your website or online service is directed to a general audience, but you have actual knowledge that you collect personal information from children under 13. Okay, this is where it kind of does apply to YouTube, except it doesn't anymore. YouTube is directed to a general audience, and they did have actual knowledge that they definitely were collecting personal information from children under 13, and they went ahead and did it anyway because COPPA was not being enforced. Okay? So now that they've paid their $170 billion or $1 million get out of jail free card, now they are absolved of that responsibility because it's been effectively passed by agreement between YouTube and the Federal Trade Commission. That responsibility has been passed on to you. The third option would be if your company runs an ad network or plug-in, and I don't think that really applies to any of us. So to determine if you're covered by COPPA, look at how the rule defines some key terms. What's a website or an online service? Mobile apps. Well, okay. Mobile apps, internet gaming platforms, plugins, ad networks, internet-enabled location-based services, voice over IP. The upshot is YouTube certainly is a website or online service. But in this scenario, effectively, you are the website or online service, even though you're operating through YouTube. Okay? The FTC, this is where it might get interesting. Probably. The FTC looks at a variety of factors to see if a site or service is directed to children under 13, including the subject matter of the site or service, visual and audio content, the use of animated characters or other child-oriented activities and incentives, the age of models, the presence of child celebrities or celebrities who appeal to kids, ads on the site or service that are directed to children, and other reliable evidence about the age of the actual or intended audience. If your website doesn't target children as its primary audience but is directed to children under 13 based on those factors, you may choose to apply COPPA protections only to users under age 13. If that's what you decide to do, you must not collect personal information from any users without first collecting age information. For users who say that they are under age 13, don't collect any personal information. So basically, YouTube was not complying with that, and now they are. The only the discouraging thing about this terminology, this is not the wording of the law, but this is coming from the Federal Trade Commission. The discouraging thing about it is that if your content is on the edges, in other words, it's kind of really directed to people, 16 years old and up, let's say, or even adults, but yet, like my content, which has anime and cartoon characters in it, your audience, there's going to be some bleed over between your intended audience, quote unquote, and the people that actually wind up watching it. I don't think I get very many people, if ever, that are under 13 that watch my content, but it's possible. If there's kids that are under 13 that are either using their parents' account or have lied about their age. Okay? So again, the thing that's discouraging about this is that the subject matter, age of the models, this stuff is very broad. Okay? The language is pretty loosey-goosey. So the concern would be that somebody, a human being at the FTC is going to make a value judgment over whether they think you intend to attract children. So that's concerning. The thing that's encouraging about it is this part, is other reliable evidence about the age or of the actual or intended audience. This is actually kind of important, and it's not a strong balancer, but it is a balancer against the fear and concern that has arisen around the whole COPPA thing. And here's why. It's pretty obvious to me that YouTube is going to work closely with the FTC to do this so-called sweep. Well, and in the other place we looked at, I don't know what the location was, I couldn't get back to it, but the word was empirical evidence. So what that suggests is this. The FTC aren't just a bunch of bastards that want to make your life miserable and fine you $40,000. Okay, if they look at your site and you're on the edge so that your content looks like it could attract children, that would be me, by the way. Okay, They are then going to take the step, yes, they are going to take the step of soliciting reliable empirical evidence. In other words, what they're going to do is they're going to look at the analytics and look at who's actually visiting the site. You know, who can be proven to be of a certain age. Okay? So what that means is that their purpose in the sweep is to find the people that are definitely targeting youngsters. I don't know who those people are. I assume they would be people who have gaming. This is kind of unfortunate because there's some people that have become really successful and wealthy, frankly, with gaming-related content or Lego-related content or, you know, Hasbro Transformers-related content. I don't really look at those channels, so I'm not real familiar with them, but for those people, this could be a real problem because it can probably be demonstrated that even though they may state that their content isn't intended for children, that the analytics may reveal that there are a lot of youngsters that are watching that content. Now, here's the part that's confusing to me. Actually, I'm sorry, it's not confusing. I was going to say that, okay, let me put it this way. This is a tough thing to explain. The thing you got to realize is that, and I know I've said it before, but if you tell YouTube that your content is not for children, what you're saying is that it's not for children, number one, but number two, that I want to continue to be monetized and be able to grow my business on YouTube. Okay? So now the problem becomes, once you make that decision, we know for a fact that YouTube will be collecting information and tracking those visitors' data to your channel. So now the question becomes, well, how would you know? How do you prove that somebody was watching your content and therefore getting their information gathered who was in fact under 13 years old? How do they know that? You know, I mean, are they going to find somebody who happens to be watching YouTube at the same time that they're live streaming on their own channel and they're obviously 9 years old? You know, how are they going to figure that out? That's kind of why this is a little scary, because what's being implied here is that the only way the data can lead to some sort of civil action against you is in fact a judgment call. Because if you've got 10 million views and everyone who's viewing claims to be over 13, then how is the FTC determining that some of them weren't? That's a big problem. Now I may come across information that tells me so, but what it sounds like is that based on the actual available analytics, where when there's a violation, there has only been a violation because somebody watching the content either lied or they all lied, because if they're using their parents' account, effectively they're lying about their age. In other words, the fact of the matter is that other than YouTube Kids, no one 12 or under is ever supposed to be watching YouTube at all. That's a fact. Okay? So how the FTC plans to determine that they were is fuzzy. So that leads you to this very, very frightening slippery slope, which is that the only thing they have to go on is that it looks really, really, really like your content that you say is not for kids, is all about Legos, and would attract kids. Therefore, ostensibly, we are going to slap you with a some sort of civil action, whatever that is. I would think the first course of action, if you're really concerned about children's welfare, then the first course of action, when there's that uncertainty, assuming they can't prove that kids 12 and under were watching, they just suspect it. Okay, based on your content, they suspect it. Okay, that's not unreasonable. In legal terms, it's a little tricky because it's hard to enforce, but in commonsensical terms, in human terms, it does make a lot of sense. The truth of the matter is, of all the kids who are watching YouTube who are only 10 years old, probably a lot of them are watching stuff that has to do with Legos and Transformers and games. You know, video games. That's pretty commonsensical. So then for you, the reason YouTube would tell you to consult your lawyer is because of this. If the FTC says your content is problematic, I would guess, I'm totally speculating here, but I would guess the first course of action would be to, the least egregious course of action that the FTC could take in cooperation with YouTube would be to specifically take that content and label it for kids. What that would mean is effectively that content just got completely demonetized. Okay? Not the worst thing in the world that could happen to you. Well, I'm carrying a conversation now that just came up. If the content gets relabeled as being for kids, well, but it's effectively demonetized. Oh, I see. Okay, so that's been clarified for me, and I assume her information is correct, that content will still get ads, but it will not get ads that target kids. Now, my question would be, is there ever a scenario where there should be ads on YouTube that target kids? Why would there be? There shouldn't be. So if there's ever been an ad on YouTube that targets kids, then YouTube has been violating the law flagrantly. Well, guess what? That's exactly what they were doing, and it's why they paid $170 million. Okay, right, correct. So there's no comments either. So if we follow this through based on the stated intent of the FTC, you would think step one would be they would just, on behalf of you, they would recategorize your content as being for kids. So again, not the worst thing that could happen, but it probably would negatively affect your revenue. Number two, the next stronger action that maybe could happen would be that your content would be taken down. Again, not the worst thing in the world. So as I'm looking at, again, what the FTC states their intent is, vis-a-vis their responsibility to enforce this law, it seems to me that in most cases, what would probably happen is your content would make less money or maybe be taken down. I see a problem here that I didn't see when I posted my earlier video, which is if they determine that your content is for kids and labeled that it's not, and they choose to go to the extreme of actually filing an action and levying a fine against you, the question is, how then do they prove that minors, well, kids under 13, were in fact watching your content? And Val's saying demographics. Well, how are they getting that demographical information is a really important question to answer, because it would be you're innocent until proven guilty, and the onus would be on the FTC to prove that there definitely were, frankly, some specific number of minors that were exposed to your content. Okay, so that's a little tricky, and so now on second glance, as I'm looking at the FTC information, talking to Valerie and evaluating just common-sensically, if you had the FTC's job, how would you do this? Well, you would definitely do, if you were YouTube, you would do what YouTube did, which was as quickly as possible pass the buck to your creators. Okay, but setting that aside, if you're the FTC, you know that real cases that involve real dollars are probably going to be difficult to actually prove the violation. So it seems to me that probably they're talking about fines because they want to threaten creators so that they really, really think twice about their content and begin to make changes immediately. Again, in order to protect kids. Frankly, as I see it, there's only one solution to that. And that is, what seems like would happen, therefore, is this. It's going to be the creators that are creating content that is pretty obviously targeting kids, even though it ostensibly isn't, like Legos, like Transformers, like the big one's going to be gaming. And then some humor content, that definitely targets kids, meme-related stuff, just stupid stuff that adults think is like, why do the kids like this? But they do, okay? I would think that that's who's going to be targeted, and they're going to be targeted hard, and the only recourse those channels will have is to basically probably find another home. Because what they need to do, if they want to keep making money, is find another home for their videos that doesn't track user data. The problem is there is no such platform that also allows them to make money the way they've been able to make money on YouTube. Yeah. So anyway, as I'm reading this, it seems like a real stretch to me to proving a violation seems difficult to me. I don't know where the analytic data would come from that would prove that somebody watched my content who was 12 years old.
Because Google tracks if you actually...
But how does Google know?
Because when you set up your account on YouTube...
Yeah, but
Google,
if you create a content and you lie about your age, how do they know you lied?
They don't know and they don't care.
Okay, and if you're using your parents' account,
They don't care.
so there is no scenario where they specifically know that a 10-year-old is on YouTube.
Yeah, they do, because there's plenty that set up accounts that say that they're kids.
I know, but what I'm saying is, how do they determine that those people lied? They look up their birth certificate? You know, I mean,
Look up that.
that's what I'm saying.
There's plenty of people that register their actual birthdays, they're under 13 and watch YouTube.
Okay, so what she's reiterating is what we already know, which is yes, there are people who sign up for YouTube who lie about their age. What I'm asking is, how would Google, YouTube know?
They don't, and they don't care.
Okay, if they then if they don't know and they don't care, which is what she's saying, then the question is, how would the FTC ever determine that the 10-year-old saw the content?
Because the fact that people have accounts set up with their actual age, they know that there's plenty of people.
But if they state their actual age and their actual age is 10, they can't have an account.
Yeah, they can.
Oh, okay, guys, this might be new information.
Like Facebook.
Okay, well, wait a second. So you're saying, okay. So you're saying you can set up a YouTube account.
Oh, yeah.
I thought you had to be 13
No.
to create a YouTube account. Okay, this is the first I've heard of this. I want to confirm this. How old must you be to have a YouTube account? What? Yeah, it says 13. Yeah, officially the age allowed by YouTube to open an account is 13 years old. So again, that supports my argument, is that there is a real challenge here in proving the case. So here's the broad brush, and this will allow me to wrap up in about 30 minutes. The broad brush is that you actually having legal exposure as a YouTube creator to the tune of getting some kind of fine, I think the odds of that are extremely low, actually. Huh?
Unless you're a super massive channel.
Right, unless you're a super massive channel. In which case, what will happen is you will be targeted because your content definitely does attract children, even though you want to be monetized and you say it's not for kids, but we all know that it attracts them, so you're going to be targeted. So I think that's what's going on here. And probably for most people, you know, people with 100,000 subscribers or less, I would think the worst thing that can happen is your video will either be taken down or against your will it'll be recategorized as for kids. Okay. Important to note that from my research, that has already happened. In other words, YouTube's AI has already gone through, and for creators who have really massive subscriptions or lots of videos, or subscribers I mean, or lots of videos, they have found that even though they indicated all their content was, say, not for kids, that YouTube apparently went in on their behalf and designated certain videos as being for kids. On what criteria and how accurate is their assessment, I have no clue. I assume it's probably sketchy. It's probably pretty okay, but sketchy. And certainly the creator might disagree. But I would think for most people, 100,000 subscribers and less, the worst thing that's going to happen is you're either going to get your video taken down or it's effectively demonetized, kind of, sort of, by being sent over to the kids department. Okay. The people who are going to get fined are the people that have, 1 million subscribers plus with content that pretty obviously is drawing in people under 13. That's my assessment. It's not quite as dire as what I thought earlier, but we will see how this unfolds. Based on just looking a little deeper here and even reading some of the act. My sense is that the FTC uh, does want to enforce the law in an even-handed way, and so obviously if your content looks like it's drawn in kids, they are going to look at the analytic data and to the best of their ability determine if it is. Again, how do they determine it? I'm not sure. The best they probably could do is that if they find your content is attracting a lot of people who are 13 or 14, who claim to be 13 or 14, then I'd be a little concerned. Now, I'm not an expert on SEO, okay? But my advice to you as a YouTube creator is if you have the ability to look at your analytics and you determine, if possible, I don't know if you can do this, but if you can determine that your viewership is in the 15 to 13-year-old range, I would be very, very cautious about how you proceed. That's my opinion. You got anything you want to add to that?
Well, I would just say that I'm sure that YouTube's actually going to be looking at what videos are watched. Well,
Yes.
in order to figure out if it's a kid, you can look at the general
Right.
they're watching, which is exactly what they don't want them to record anymore.
I don't completely understand what you just said.
In other words, if you're a kid, you're going to watch a lot of things that
Right.
are oriented, so it's the amount of content you watch.
So you're saying they're gonna you're saying you're gonna take users that are 13 to 15 years old and look at what are they watching, and that's who you target.
Adults, that's how you would know them.
Right. That's how you target who to pick on.
Yes.
Right, I got you. So anyway, that's all for now, guys. Thanks for being patient. Based on what's all going on, I would say I am not going to take my content down at this point. I don't feel that's warranted. So that's good news. But we'll definitely keep a close eye on this. And as I always say, there will be more later.